Hi everyone, my name is Michael Pedone and I'm going to be your sales trainer for this series. Before we get started, I think it's essential for you to know that I've been successfully selling by phone for over 25 years now. That means I know what it feels like to deal with call reluctance, rejection, selling during recessions, hitting quotas, bouncing back after missing quotas, and how to find motivation when the phone feels like a 25-pound weight and you don't want to pick it up anymore. If you are a sales rep and you want to be better at selling and you need a simple step-by-step process that you can adapt to your style and your industry that will help you get more sales, you're in the right place. If you're tired of hearing things like no thanks, not interested, we're all set, have something that already does that, we're going to solve that today. Whether you are brand new in sales or a veteran, I think you're going to find this very valuable if you're making outbound calls and you're not hitting the numbers you want. In this session, you're going to learn pre-call planning strategies, how to create opening value statements that pique interest, and how to lower resistance when asking probing questions. So let's get started. What to do before ever saying, "Hello, my name is." There are two types of outbound sales calls. What are they? Most people say it's either a cold call or a warm call. However, the right answer is it's either a first-time call or a follow-up call. Here's why. The definition of a cold call is contacting any prospect that is not currently raising their hand. Agreed? That means the definition of a warm call is when a prospect raises their hand. An example of a warm call would be when an inbound lead fills out a form, or they schedule a time to speak with you, or they fill out a form on the website and says, "I need pricing information," and it comes into your CRM and gets assigned to you. That is a warm lead. Now, what do warm leads and cold leads have in common? You still have to pick up the phone for the first time to contact them, correct? You're calling them for the first time, whether it's warm or cold. That is a first-time call. If you've spoken with the prospect in the past and now you make another call to them, that is a follow-up call. Make sense? The reason why this is so important is because every sales call that you make should have an objective. When you're making a first-time outbound call, whether it's a warm lead or a cold call, what is your objective? Most salespeople will answer with build rapport, or set an appointment, or close a sale. But none of these answers are correct. Building rapport should happen naturally as you progress through the sales process and never be a check mark on your sales process. Besides, most prospects can sense insincerity when it comes to false rapport building. Another common answer about the objective of making a first-time call is to set an appointment. However, setting an appointment only to find out later that the prospect was not qualified is a complete waste of everyone's time, and you cannot fully qualify a prospect until you have a conversation with them. Some people say the objective of a first-time call is to close the sale. But how do you close an unqualified lead? The answer is you can't. So when you're making a first-time outbound call, your objective is to qualify the prospect. Even if you're tasked with setting up appointments, the last thing you want to do is set up appointments with people who aren't qualified for you or your team to meet with. So before you pick up the phone, you have to determine whether it's a first-time call or a follow-up call. If it's a first-time call, you know that your first objective is to see if the prospect is qualified. Now, when you're making a follow-up call, what is your objective? The most common answer is to move the sale forward. But the problem with that answer is it's too general and there's no specific action steps for a sales rep to take in order to accomplish that goal. So to uncover the right answer, can we agree that we can look at the sales process like a timeline? From the time you first pick up the phone to the time you get a final answer, that's the sales timeline. Agreed? Now, does your first-time call always end in the same spot on that sales timeline? The answer, of course, is no. So therefore, we can't say that your objective in a follow-up call is to finish qualifying or to set up a demo or to close a deal, because the last call could have ended anywhere on that sales timeline. Make sense? So what's the answer then? Let's uncover it this way. Think back to when you had a first-time call with a prospect that was going well, and the prospect even started asking you buying signal questions. When that happens, where would you say your temperature level is? I know my temperature level goes way up. And where would you say your prospect's temperature level is in that same moment when they are asking you buying signal questions? It's fair to say their temperature level is up as well, correct? But then the call comes to an end because something else needed to happen, so you have to schedule a follow-up call. So let's say they ask you to call them back in a week. So a week later, you look at your to-do list for that day and you see you have to call the prospect back. You start reading your notes and you remember how interested they were. Where does your temperature level go in that scenario? It goes up, right? So you pick up the phone and you reach out to them, but where is your prospect's temperature level a week later, or a day later, or even an hour later after the first call that they had with you? In most cases, their temperature level is going to be cold. Now, yes, every once in a while, you'll call and they'll be ready to buy, and that's great. But that doesn't happen often enough for us to make a living on just those types of calls, does it? The majority of times, we're going to call back and their temperature level is going to be low. That's why your objective in a follow-up call should be to reignite the sale. Do you see how this is a smarter strategy as opposed to just saying you have to move the sale forward? Now that you have a very specific objective, which is reignite the sale, you can come up with a strategy to accomplish that no matter where you left off on the previous call. Does that make sense? Okay, so your first assignment is to separate your lead list. First-time calls should be in their own category and not mixed in with follow-up calls. I'll discuss this more in the time management section, but for now, make sure you separate your list because if you're bouncing from one type of call to another, it will slow you down. Making first-time calls, for example, you know the objective is to qualify the leads. By the time you make the third call, you're in the zone because you know what to say and all your calls have the same goal. But if you go from a first-time call to a follow-up call to a first-time call, you won't be able to get into a rhythm. So first identify what type of call it is, either a first-time call or a follow-up call, and then ask yourself what you want to accomplish on this call. What is your objective? You want to do that until it's instinctive. You know that if it's a first-time call, you have to see if they're qualified before anything else. You know that if you've had a conversation with them already, you need to warm them up again so you can get things moving. Now, your sales call objective will be based on what type of call it is, first time or follow-up. You need to be prepared for one of three possible scenarios you'll be faced with every time you make a sales call, and it does not matter if it's a first-time call or a follow-up call. Every time you pick up the phone, you're going to be faced with one of these three possible scenarios. The three possible scenarios when doing an outbound call are: 1, you could get the gatekeeper. 2, you could get voicemail. 3, you actually get the prospect. Let me ask you this. Have you ever made a sales call and your prospect answered the phone and it threw you off your game for a second and you responded with, "Oh, I didn't expect to get you"? That should never happen on a sales call. If it does, it means you weren't prepared prior to making the call. In order to improve your sales call success, you need to be prepared before picking up the phone to handle whichever scenario happens on that call. You need a game plan or a sales strategy that addresses whatever situation you're faced with. Now, for those of you who weren't sure why it's important to determine if it's a first-time call or a follow-up call, let me ask you this. When you make a call to your prospects, are you going to say the same thing to a gatekeeper on a first-time call as you would a follow-up call? No. What about voicemail? Are you going to leave the same voicemail on a first-time call as you would a follow-up call? No way. And you wouldn't say the same thing to a prospect on a follow-up call as you would a first-time call, correct? When you know ahead of time what the possible scenarios are and you have a game plan that can handle each scenario, you will no longer fear picking up the phone. This is how you get rid of call reluctance. In order to improve your sales call success, you need to be prepared to handle whichever scenario is going to happen on that call. You need to know which sales strategy to use to address the specific situation you're faced with. This is how you get rid of call reluctance.